Both these events have been extraordinarily bewildering, totally unexpected. Everything seemed to have taken place within 10 days. Uh, all of us were under the impression that Assad is now well placed in Damascus. He enjoyed regional support. There was a lot of engagement from Saudi Arabia and the UAE. He had been taken back into the Arab League. And while there was a small corner of the country that was still under rebel control, nobody felt that he did not enjoy total control of his country. And therefore, in this background, this is a very astonishing development. There's no doubt about that. This is a deep seated conspiracy put together by Israel, Turkey, and Saudi Arabia. Israel, Turkey, and the United States. Apologies. They had different reasons to obtain what has just taken place.
Hello and welcome to a special interview for The Wire. Momentous developments have unfolded in Syria with the speed of summer lightning. Hayat Tahrir al-Sham has captured Damascus, Bashar al-Assad has fled the country and sought refuge in Moscow, and Abu Muhammad al-Jolani is now in control. How did all of this happen so swiftly? What does it mean for Syria? And what does it portend for the Middle East and the wider world? Joining me for today's discussion is one of our great experts on West Asia, India's former ambassador to Saudi Arabia, Oman, and the UAE, Talmiz Ahmad. Talmiz Ahmad, in just over a week, Damascus has fallen to the Syrian rebels and Assad is reported to have fled the country. Russian state media has now confirmed that he's been given refuge in Moscow. Are you surprised by what's happened and the speed with which events have unfolded?
Yes, both these events have been extraordinarily bewildering, totally unexpected. Everything seemed to have taken place within 10 days. All of us were under the impression that Assad is now well placed in Damascus. He enjoyed regional support. There was a lot of engagement from Saudi Arabia and the UAE. He had been taken back into the Arab League. And while there was a small corner of the country that was still under rebel control, nobody felt that he did not enjoy total control of his country. And therefore, in this background, this is a very astonishing development. There's no doubt about that.
Now, it seems, starting with Aleppo some 10 days ago, and then Hama and Homs, and finally Damascus, in each instance, it seems the Assad army literally put down its weapons and melted away. They simply didn't fight. And that's something even the Russians have commented on. How do you explain that?
There is no hard information in the public domain just yet. My own feeling, my own impression is as follows. This is a deep-seated conspiracy put together by Israel, Turkey, and Saudi Arabia. Israel, Turkey, and the United States. Apologies. They had different reasons to obtain what has just taken place. The Turks have had deep-seated hostility for the Assad regime and have maintained a military presence in North Syria in order to monitor the movements of the Kurds. Israelis, of course, want to evict Iran from Syria and cut off Iran from this extreme outreach that it has enjoyed at the Mediterranean, at the border of Israel. The United States sees this as an opportunity to wound Iran diplomatically, geopolitically, and at the same time evict Russia from its port at the Tartus. These three have come together. The coalition that was formed, that consisted of an Islamist group, the Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, the Kurdish group, the Syrian Democratic Forces, the Turkmen group, the Syrian National Forces, as well as various motley group of rebels. They are a coalition that could only have been formed by these three countries, Turkey, Israel, and the United States coming together. And why did the Syrian army collapse? I think there it is part of a very detailed arrangement with the top military leadership, starting with the defense minister possibly, but certainly the generals, that this is the time for them to melt away, not to fight. You will remember something similar happened in Iraq when you had the when you had the ISIS elements besieging Mosul, and 20,000 Iraqi soldiers just disappeared. I think whenever the soldiers see that there is no point in sacrificing their life, no larger purpose to defend, and that they are going to be beaten, because I'm sure the Israelis and the Americans conveyed to them that if they fight, they're going to be bombed from the air, just as the Iraqis have been done. So I think that this is the explanation that I have found as of now.
Tell me one thing. How confident are you that this is the result of what you called a deep-seated conspiracy involving Israel, Turkey, and the United States? You began by saying there is no hard facts available as yet, which is why I'm asking, how confident are you?
I am very confident. I don't believe there is any other explanation. There are snippets. A few days ago, there was a news item that UAE was asked to convey to Bashar Assad that if he cut off his ties with Iran, he would be rehabilitated. But he could not obviously do that. Secondly, with regard to the Israelis, they have a Hezbollah presence within Syria, and they have been very concerned about the Iranian presence. The third is the Turks. How is it a coalition can be formed with a Turkish protege like the Hayat Tahrir al-Sham and the Turkish Turkmen group, the national forces and the Kurdish forces? So you have the Kurdish, that means these are sworn enemies which are part of the same coalition. Hence, I believe it was a very well planned conspiracy put together by these three countries for their own purposes.
Now, is this a serious setback for Iran and Russia, both of whom supported Assad, and on the other hand, a small victory for Turkey, who supports the rebels?
I think it is a very serious setback for Iran. It is a geopolitical setback for them. It is a political setback. And they have already been hurt very badly by the assault on Hezbollah and Hamas. And therefore, the kind of axis of resistance that the Iranians had put together, and which was the core support for their security in the region, has, I think, melted away. Today, they don't have that frontier right across the region. They now have to defend their own borders. That the last time they had to do that was during the Iran-Iraq war. So I would say that this is a serious setback. With regard to the Turks within the Astana group of Russia, Iran, and Turkey, the Turks have always had a separate agenda. And they have been supporters of the Hayat Tahrir al-Sham from the very beginning. I recall about 3 years ago, the Syrian armed forces were poised to attack Idlib and destroy the HTS. It is Turkey that intervened very forcefully with Putin and pleaded with the Russians to leave the HTS to them and that they would manage the HTS. All the rest, Russia as well as Iran, were deeply concerned about the HTS because it is an offshoot of the Islamic State. And therefore, they wanted to annihilate it. But it is Turkey that prevented that annihilation. And you can see the result of that now.
What about Russia? It has a naval base in Tartus. It has an air force base in Hamemim. The future of both of those now must be in doubt. Secondly, this was Russia's main hold in the Eastern Mediterranean. It's effectively lost it. And thirdly, when Russia went in a big way in 2015-16 in support of Assad, the Russians boasted that they were going to be in Syria for the long term. That long term has ended in under 10 years.
Russia had intervened in Syria in 2015 in order to prevent regime change, precisely what has happened just now. And they, at that time, were also anxious to prevent the Western outreach into the region through Saudi Arabia. As you know, at that time, the lead role against Bashar Assad at that time was being played by Saudi Arabia, which then, of course, changed. If the Russians now are no longer in possession of the same status that they had about 9, 10 years ago. They are very deeply embroiled in Ukraine. Their forces have taken a hammering. Of course, they have made tremendous progress, but the principal territory, the principal theater for them is Ukraine. And now, if they were to use military force in this sorry situation, where the support for Assad was melting away, this would have been a scenario, a very dangerous scenario of Russian forces directly engaging with American and Israeli forces in the air and possibly even on the ground. I think that the Russian assessment was that this is a fight that is already lost and they don't need to escalate matters for a dying cause. I think, finally, as a result of very objective assessment, believe that giving the man asylum is the best they could do in this sorry state of affairs.
Now, to what extent is the sudden and mystifying collapse of the Assad regime explained by Israel's war against Hezbollah and its campaign against Iran? Neither were able to come to Assad's defense. In fact, Hezbollah withdrew all its forces, such as they were, from Syria.
You must remember that Syria, like all other authoritarian regimes in the region, has a security force, including the armed forces, which are useless as far as international military conflict is concerned, cross-border military conflict is concerned. They are principally used to oppress their own people at home. This is the standard pattern of all Arab armies. Most of them are incapable of actually fighting a good war outside their borders. So now what has happened is this Syrian army overwhelmingly assessed. I think the message is given to them by their generals that our leader is lost. There is no point in sacrificing your life, and you should just melt away.
But
I think that this is what the Iranians. Hezbollah cannot fight for Bashar Assad. They can only support the Syrian army. If the Syrian army is not in a position to fight, I don't think anyone else is going to stand up in that space.
But was Hezbollah in a position to even support the Syrian army? It's been battered by Israel. That's what I'm saying. And Iran suffered grossly right. At Israel's hands too. Is that why neither Iran nor Hezbollah could come to Assad's defense?
Hezbollah's principal theater of combat and political activity is Lebanon. It was a small cadre was brought into Syria under Iranian tutelage in order to protect the regime at a time when there were very crucial assaults upon Assad in the early stages of the civil conflict. It is Hezbollah's presence that helped them at that time. Second is the Russian invasion the Russian involvement from 2015. At the end of the day, it must be noted, Hezbollah was a small support force as far as Bashar Assad was concerned. It played its role at a crucial time, and now it won. Now, with regard to Lebanon, I would say the story is still not known. The Israelis have said they have decimated Hezbollah. I think they are wrong. I think that the ground fighting, their Israelis' principal assault with their air force is on civilian populations.
Let's not deflect.
Ground
Ground
fighting in Lebanon has been very difficult for the Israelis. They have suffered heavy casualties. I would explain to you that what has happened with regard to the ceasefire is largely a result of the Israelis.
Talmiz Ahmad, let's not deflect our discussion into Lebanon. We're not talking about Lebanon today. We're talking about Syria. Let's keep our focus on Syria. Now, the BBC's international editor, Jeremy Bowen, described the momentous developments in Syria as a seismic moment for the Middle East. What does this political earthquake mean for the region? There's no one in India who understands the West Asia region better than you.
He's right, and I think all of us are right. Over the last few months, largely as a result of initiatives from Israel, the hammer blows delivered to the Hezbollah leadership as well as to Hamas, and the mass casualties of the Palestinian people and the attacks upon Iran have qualitatively transformed the regional security scenario. Iran was a principal presence largely because of the axis of resistance. It would seem to us at this point, if the axis of resistance has not been destroyed, it has certainly been mortally damaged, particularly in Lebanon, particularly because of the loss of the top cadre. Is the Hezbollah still capable of fighting? My answer is yes. But what the Israelis are doing is to inflict more and more civilian casualties in order to pressurize Hezbollah to cease fighting the way they have been doing. As far the principal theater for as far as Israel is concerned is Gaza. There they have decimated the population. They argue that they have hurt Hamas very severely. Hamas's capacity to fight is almost non-existent. But Israel does not want a ceasefire in Hamas because the minute there is a ceasefire in Gaza, you will have domestic issues raising their ugly head as far as Netanyahu is concerned. Netanyahu will now take full credit for what has happened in Syria. His latest interview already indicates that. His entire agenda today is domestic. So I would say the first thing you must look at is the situation in Israel and the domestic politics of Israel. The second, with regard to Palestine, we still don't have a ceasefire and we don't know what will be the day after. I think we are looking at an Israeli agenda of an endless conflict. With regard to the GCC countries, Saudi Arabia and UAE are likely to be much more accommodative of the changes. I don't think that there will be renewed hostility between Saudi Arabia and Iran. I believe it is in the interest of both sides to maintain good relations. I don't believe Saudi Arabia will be normalizing ties with Israel, but it will accommodate the changes. If you remember, the reason why the Saudis had got into Syria in 2011, it was because having lost Iraq to the Iranians, they wanted to win back Syria into the mainstream Sunni Arab fold. Possibly this is an opportunity now for the Saudis to put in place a government that is likely to be more supportive of the Saudis and the Emiratis than the Assad government had been over several years. I would say my first thoughts are these. I'll respond to any other question that you have.
Hi, I'm Karan Thapar. Over the last few years, I hope you've been watching my program, The Interview on the Wire. During that period, I've interviewed doctors, politicians, businessmen, scientists, authors, and even the occasional Nobel laureate. For me, it's been exciting. I hope it's been enjoyable for you. But these, as you know, are tough times, and if this program is going to remain bold, independent, and sometimes even defiant, then I think we need your support. At the end of the day, it's a truism, but editorial independence is best defended by the viewers. So if you would like this program to remain the way it is, forthright, outspoken, and interesting, then would you consider supporting us? All you have to do is to click on the description at the bottom. But more than anything else, I hope you will continue to watch the interview. Your viewership means an awful lot to me.
Tell me, what do we know about the Hayat Tahrir al-Sham and its leader Abu Muhammad al-Jolani? He is effectively going to be the new ruler of Syria.
Abu Muhammad Jolani was the right-hand man of Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi at a time when the outfit was called Islamic State of Iraq. In 2011, when the fighting in Syria began, a civil conflict engineered by Saudi Arabia, Turkey, and Qatar, at that time, uh, uh, Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi sent Abu Muhammad Jolani into Syria. Within a year, this outfit that he led, called Jabhat Nusra or Victory Front, became the best fighting force in the country as far as the rebellion is concerned. In 2013, Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi announced that Jabhat Nusra was an affiliate of the Islamic State of Iraq, and and now the entity would be called the Islamic State of Iraq and Syria. Abu Muhammad Jolani resisted this affiliation, declared that his outfit is independent, and pleaded with Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi to manage affairs in Iraq and leave Syria to him. But at that time, ISIS leaders did not accept that, and Jabhat Nusra fell into the background. There was some fighting between ISIS and Jabhat Nusra, and Jabhat Nusra did not do so well. But the forces raised against ISIS, both in Iraq and in Syria, were so strong that ISIS was finally destroyed. By 2019, Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi had been killed. So now you find Abu Muhammad al-Jolani re-emerging from the shadows and reinventing himself. He cut off his links with the Islamic State, projected a more moderate view, became a public figure, started meeting people in the region, talking about services, providing food and medicine, and providing even judicial services in the area, built up his popularity at Idlib. He found a very powerful patron in Turkey. Turkey at that time had an Islamist bent of mind, but Turkey saw in Jolani an affiliate deep in the heart of Syria, and he flourished under the protection of Turkey. Turkey also had issues with the Kurds, and at that time it built up the Syrian National Forces made up of Turkmen, Arab, and some other group against the Kurds. Hayat Tahrir al-Sham came to dominate Idlib, built up its forces. My personal view is there is no way Hayat Tahrir al-Sham could have put together this coalition without the active involvement of the Americans, the Israelis, and the Turks themselves. There's no way because the Kurds are beneficiaries of American protection, and it's only the Americans that would have encouraged them to join this coalition. What happens now, we don't know. But as of now, it is very difficult to believe that Abu Muhammad Jolani has overnight changed himself.
Wait, hang on. Let me stop you there. Let me stop you there. Let me stop you there because you're going ahead of yourself a little. We need to explain to the audience the thought that Abu Bakr Jolani did attempt to change himself. AFP, the French news agency, says that he broke with Al Qaeda in 2016. Today, he's described by the scholar Thomas Pierrot as a pragmatic radical who gives interviews to CNN and wears military fatigues in preference to the jihadist turban. He's clearly said to be projecting a pragmatic, more moderate face compared to the one he was projecting 8, 9, 10 years ago.
Absolutely.
Are you disputing that or are you agreeing with it?
He has been in the shadows for over the last 3 years. I followed him up to the time when he began to reinvent himself. Most people were very skeptical about it even at that time. A strong right-hand man of Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi, there is no history of such people overnight changing. Obviously, he's a very clever person. He's a survivor at a time when the Islamic State has been decimated. He's a survivor and has his own group. But I think he could not have emerged the way he has emerged without Turkish support.
Now, yesterday, the BBC showed footage from Damascus of a city that looked calm. Cars were plying on roads, people were celebrating and distributing sweets. The BBC also carried a brief statement from the Syrian Prime Minister, al-Jalali, where he said he would cooperate with the rebels and that he had not fled the country, he had stayed on because he wished to ensure a reasonably peaceful change of regime. Are you surprised by the fact that this is happening, that it could be reasonably peaceful?
At this point, we don't know the full scale, content, and depth of the conspiracy. I would see that the lessons learned from the mishaps relating to Afghanistan, Iraq, and Libya, an attempt is being made to manage the flow of events after the coup d'etat, after the regime change. As you know, in the three places that I mentioned, the regime change was handled very badly, and it went very badly for the people who thought that they had won. Or you remember what happened with regard to Iraq and the regime change that occurred. An attempt is being made, it would seem to me, to have a figurehead who would be the symbol of some kind of continuity in government and a provision of stability. I think this is a mirage. None of that is going to happen. You are going to look at very serious disorder and turmoil because this group that unseated Assad is now going to fight. There are inherent contradictions in this group, and I can't imagine the Americans and the Israelis and the Turks being able to manage it.
Now, as we were talking, one eye was looking at the BBC, and I noticed that Ursula von der Leyen, the president of the European Commission, has said that the EU will help rebuild Syria. Does that suggest that, as far as the European Union is concerned, al-Jolani is acceptable as a leader, that his new moderate pragmatic side has won them over? Is that the hint we're getting?
This is day one of the change. We have a very, very long way to go. I have very sharp memories of what happened in Iraq and of what happened in Libya. Do recall, Libya is in turmoil 15 years later. I do not believe any of these people have the capacity or even, frankly, the interest. Each of them came on board with very limited tactical purposes. The Israelis to get the Iranians out, the Americans to get the Iranians and the Russians out, and the Turks to get Assad out. That was it. There is no strategic vision. They have no long-term capacity. They have no capacity, to my mind, to manage this huge country of such diversity and such a potential conflictual scenario. Welcoming people and all, don't worry about that. We saw that in Iraq, and the cameras were all over the place. A very high degree of misinformation is also likely to be coming in alongside what is happening. But I don't agree with any of this. European Union has been a bystander. Even in Europe, they are in a mess. I would not attach too much significance to any European effort. If there is anyone who can play a serious role, it is, I think, to my mind, Saudi Arabia, possibly in association with the UAE.
Okay. Finally, is the fall of Assad bad news for India? I noticed today's Economic Times says that he supported India's position on Kashmir. He believed and publicly said that Kashmir was an internal matter for India and India had a right to do what it wants. Is that going to be the position that al-Jolani takes as well? Or will al-Jolani differ markedly over the Kashmir issue, given his Al-Qaeda background, his ISIS background?
There is likely to be prolonged disorder and turmoil in Syria. As of now, India's interests are not directly affected. Our principal relations are with the GCC countries as well as with Israel, and I think that is going to continue business as usual. We have every reason to be concerned about what happens with regard to Iran. We'll flush with this kind of triumphalism that you are seeing in relation to the defeat of Hezbollah, Hamas, and Syria, Israel wanting to encourage a joint Israeli-American assault upon Iran. If that happens, obviously the region will be in prolonged conflict, and I believe that will harm India's long-term interest. India's diplomatic effort today should be to counsel Israel towards restraint. We have never exercised this option before, but we should do that now, if not for any other reason, our own self-interest. Our energy security, our economic interest, as well as the safety of our community, we should oppose the escalation of conflict, and we should push for a ceasefire in Gaza as well as a peace process. Initially, conflict management and possibly later conflict resolution.
Talmiz Ahmad, thank you very much for this interview and in particular for agreeing to do it literally hours after the dramatic events in Syria had unfolded, minutes after it was formally announced that Bashar al-Assad has been given sanctuary by Moscow. Thank you very much indeed. Take care. Stay safe.
Thank you very much.
Hi, I'm Karan Thapar. Over the last few years, I hope you've been watching my program, The Interview on the Wire. During that period, I've interviewed doctors, politicians, businessmen, scientists, authors, and even the occasional Nobel laureate. For me, it's been exciting. I hope it's been enjoyable for you. But these, as you know, are tough times, and if this program is going to remain bold, independent, and sometimes even defiant, then I think we need your support. At the end of the day, it's a truism, but editorial independence is best defended by the viewers. So if you would like this program to remain the way it is, forthright, outspoken, and interesting, then would you consider supporting us? All you have to do is to click on the description at the bottom. But more than anything else, I hope you will continue to watch the interview. Your viewership means an awful lot to me.